Like I'm case in point. A year ago, I did not invest in my own personal brand, partly because I didn't make time and understand it. But the other thing is I felt like it made me look like I was trying to be on the front of the float. But then once I realized if I don't do this, there are going to be a lot of people that can't even be on the float, right? My float's going to get a lot smaller. So the personality-led growth is, how do you lead by example? I think it was Forbes had some data that said 49% of your brand's reputation is directly tied to your reputation. And the smaller you are as an organization, the bigger that is, right? So if you're a small organization, call it sub 100 people, it's probably 80% of the brand's reputation. And I always tell folks, so the idea is like, okay, if you do nothing online or in the public, not good. If you do something negative, it's actually 10 times worse, right? Because you can't separate that.
Welcome to High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. This season, we're diving deeper with more solo episodes, where I'll share the experiences that have led to recognition by EY, Forbes, Fast Company, and others. Not as a boast, but as milestones on my entrepreneurial path. From growing multi-million-dollar firms to successful business exits and building high-performance teams with a global perspective. I'll reveal the insights and strategies from my journey and share them with you so that we can win together. Alongside these solo episodes, we'll have industry visionaries and thought leaders, and we'll explore effective leadership. Ready to empower your leadership journey with real success stories? Let's embark on this transformational journey together.
So let me jump in here. So if traditional search is not producing the same effective results, if the machines are now starting to pick the winners,
Yep.
right? So a phrase I've borrowed from you.
Yeah.
What do I do about it as a business leader? How do I think about it differently? Now, so this is the doom and gloom, or not even doom and gloom. This is the business reality,
Yeah.
right? As a business leader, how do I think, act, behave different?
Yeah, I mean, I always get that question, and it's the right question. And I'm glad people are finally asking the question, right? Someone I know and trust and respect, right, was talking to me recently, and I reposted somebody that's an expert on SEO and all these changes, and he keeps talking about these things. We're going to meet, I guess, next week and start talking about doing a podcast episode together. But people kept debating with me because Google still owns 90% of all search traffic. Right. I just want to put a fine point on this so people understand, because I got tired of, like, last night I was like, I'm done debating this with you guys. Right. And it's like, but they were like, but Greg, but Google, because I talked about how scary it is on the ChatGPT and Claude. I mean, but they were like, but Google still owns 90% of all search traffic. I said, I agree. I said, but they went to AI mode. I said, you're not. I said, you're debating on who's eating your lunch. And I'm simply telling you your lunch has been eaten. Right. I was like, I didn't say that Google doesn't own 90%. I said they're still not getting to your fucking site. So I don't know what you're talking about right now.
Because Google is in a fight for their life.
Netflix meets Blockbuster moment.
And so Google said, instead of sending them to your site, I'm going to send them to another page on Google that has the data from your site that I've pulled, and they're going to stay in my platform.
100%. And so understanding that reality, it's hard because people have started to, and I get why they say that, because they were trying to conflate and make this analog of, well, it's still the regular search, because Google on search is like, yeah, but Google changed, man. They had no choice. I said, you guys got to follow what's happening. I said, well, one of the co-founders of Google comes out of retirement to come back and work. It probably should have been a signal that some radical changes are, afoot, right? Like, and so, and they're continually going down to AI mode. And within the last few days, and that's why I reposted something last night, Google's getting more and more, because at the end of the day, they want to own the entire customer journey. That is their survival. They want to own from search to research to checkout, right? And that is a fundamental change. And I get it, right? There's like the future loss and the loss aversion,
Yep.
right? But so that's like the lead flow crisis side. So what to do about it, right? You still need to do SEO. I'm not saying you don't. I'm simply saying, if that was 80% of your lead flow before, it may be 10 to 20% in the very near future, right? And if you don't understand that, right, you're going, like, where are my leads? Like, where's all, but I do want to say, but and so what I netted down on, and we came back to, is like, all right, what are we going to do? And you and I brainstormed on a lot of stuff late last year on, like, what's going on in the world beginning of this year. And I was like, all right, we have to show up in a lot more places and a lot more often. Right. So I say, and I started to understand, I registered the domain, what is AEO last November? What is answer engine optimization or AI optimization, however you want to think about it, right? And now people are like, yeah, man, we need to figure that out. And I was like, and I started going down this rabbit hole. Now, then I stopped and I realized, and I used my computer science background. I was like, how are we going to optimize for something that could change every 5 minutes if the AI decides that there's a different way to view authority? Oh, how am I going to do that if every one of these foundational models, because you're not having to just optimize for Google, OpenAI looks at it, or ChatGPT looks at authority differently. Claude looks at it differently because the sources of where they're pulling this. If you ask all 4 or 5 of these large language models, give me the top 5 or something, they're going to all be different. How does one optimize for a world like that? And because the people want to keep doing the analogs and say, well, this is just like search, and I'm gonna go on a rant about it, like it's just like that's gonna be a part of my new like on my keynotes. I'm like, if you come to me with it's just right, like, oh, it's just this. I'm like, it's not, it's just this, right?
It's a
If your view,
tsunami.
right. But people keep saying, well, they say, oh, it's just this thing. Like, you just gonna go out of business. You just gonna get left behind. And I just don't have time for this shit. Right. Like it's just fundamentally
See that?
what's it?
You just gonna get left behind.
And you just gonna go out of business. Right? Because you're literally trying to compare a bicycle to a space shuttle,
Yep.
right? This isn't the difference between a bicycle and a motorcycle. It's the bicycle and a space shuttle.
How many people did Accenture lay off?
11,000.
And one of the things I interject that is because sometimes people try to debate things that are measurable. And if you look at the amount of money, and you mentioned this, I'm just recapping it, the hundreds of millions of dollars that Meta is investing, the hundreds of billions of dollars that Google is investing, hundreds of millions of dollars that Apple is investing in AI, right? And then that doesn't even talk about private equity and different things and NVIDIA that's
You need to
working on
put
the
a
chips
B
and
is billions.
billions. Yeah, the hundreds of
Meta's
billions. That's
making
right.
a $20 billion bet that, and Mark Zuckerberg flat out came out. He's like, it may work, it may not. But what choice do I have? Right? The numbers are getting so big that Sam Altman is trying to raise $1 trillion on a business that is not churning out, is churning out
And
low billions.
and so the way I think about things is like, all right, so there's that piece of the investment of people that have a lot more data than I do.
Right.
And then there's the impact of people more like you and I, right? People that are working that are no longer working, right? So why is Accenture letting go of 11? Think about what it takes to get a job at Accenture. You gotta be pretty smart. You gotta be pretty articulate. You gotta be good in front of clients. You gotta go to a good school. And 11,000 of those people are unemployed. And they have specifically attributed it to them not being AI ready. And so when I share with people, I actually try not to debate a lot. I'm just not as passionate about it. I was just like, hey, listen, if you want to do it, great. You can be on the front end or in the mid tier, or you can be on the sidelines and watch. The only thing that you shouldn't do is complain about your personal outcome when you do nothing.
I mean, you asked me earlier this year why I named the podcast AI Voice of Victim. And I said, first thing, my flippant answer was like, just wait 6 months, right? Because what I was trying to get across is that there's going to become this moment where people are going to feel like they're left behind. And I scream into the camera sometimes just trying to get people like, please just lean in and try to do this stuff, right? I joke all the time. It's like in DC, they say, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're on the menu. And I said, nobody's going to be cutting up my future, right? And like when you talked about why do I keep learning, I'm like, shit, man, because these people making plans and I want to be a part of the plans, right? And so I always talk about the tsunami that's coming. And I say, look, I get the folks that when you see the tsunami that run for the hills, right? I get the weirdos like you and I that want to go ride that wave and we see it coming. I said, what I don't get is the people that just standing there and see this giant
And
ass
making
wave.
no decision.
They're just gonna stand there and get crushed. I don't get that. I said, my dad is a retired truck driver. And when he was teaching me about driving, the thing that he said to me, he said, son, just keep it between the ditches and don't stop in traffic. Right? Keep it between the ditches, don't stop in traffic. If people could fundamentally just understand, you got to keep it moving. I think at Meta they had this like image, or they show it's a rocking horse. And I think the premise is don't confuse motion for progress, right? When you rocking back and forth, yeah, you're moving, but you ain't going nowhere. And I feel like that's what people are doing. They're rocking back and forth, and it's like, come on, man, you got to go do this. But the centerpiece though, the 11,000, they basically said they can't get right. Right? They basically can't do the things that they need in the world of the company that they're building.
Let's do one more pivot, because I could talk to you all day. We cut up. You talk a lot recently about personality-led growth for C-suite leaders. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell folks there's two dynamic forces that can help you grow to combat against the lead flow crisis, right? And that's how we ended up with our four-piece strategy here at Walk West. Those two dynamic forces are personality-led growth, right? It used to be what you know, then it was who you know, now it's who knows you. And right, if you go back to the lead flow crisis, people are going to have a hard time getting awareness and cutting through the noise, right? The who knows you, right? And so if you've not invested in your own personal brand, like I'm case in point. A year ago, I did not invest in my own personal brand, partly because I didn't make time and understand it. But the other thing is I felt like it made me look like I was trying to be on the front of the float. But then once I realized if I don't do this, there are going to be a lot of people that can't even be on the float, right? My float's going to get a lot smaller. So the personality-led growth is how do you lead by example? I think it was Forbes had some data that said 49% of your brand's reputation is directly tied to your reputation. And the smaller you are as an organization, the bigger that is, right? So if you're a small organization, call it sub 100 people, it's probably 80% of the brand's reputation. And I always tell folks, so the idea is like, okay, if you do nothing online or in the public, not good. If you do something negative, it's actually 10 times worse, right? Because you can't separate that.
And what are some of the tactical things that you've done, right? Once you had the awareness that personality-led growth mattered, and then you needed to go through a brand building kind of exercise and process yourself, what are some of the things that you've put into practice,
Yeah.
right, as the face of Walk West, as the face of AI adoption, in growing your brand?
Well, there's a couple things. One leads into the other side of the force is personality growth and is community led growth, right? And I always tell people, I said the ocean that was Google has dried up. What ponds are you going to fish in? Right? And what I try to get across is you got to find other communities. And so what I'm doing is trying to align myself with other communities that may be a publication, right? There may be tech organizations, there may be community colleges, people with at least similar interests, if not aligned interests, right? People that have newsletters, right? How do I get, I said at the beginning of this year, and I'm sure I confused a lot of people at Walk West. I said we're gonna do three things really well. We're gonna be make sure that you're seen, heard, and cited, CITED, by humans and machines alike for maximum results. I've been saying this since January. And people are like, what does that mean? I was like, we're in an era now, you gotta show up everywhere your customer expects you to show up, right? You have to be in so many I've quantified it for folks. I said you need 4 to 6 to survive and to thrive right now, you need 4 to 6 new roles across 8 to 10 new capabilities or technologies to deliver 10 to 100x more content twice as fast across 4 or 5 different new channels, right? If you start adding all that up, the cost, the people cost of it is too enormous for you. So you're gonna have to lean into technology, right? And so what I'm just trying to get across to folks, I'm like, you've got to be to so many different places. So you're gonna have to, we got a team, we got our communities, right? Whether that's writing, because some people don't want to be on camera, right? I don't want to write. Right. It's like not because I don't feel like I can write. Is one, I respect other people that are much better at it
Yeah.
than myself, right? Uh but also I don't want to be judged. If things get lost in translation,
Sure.
right? I put something like, oh shit, I ain't mean it that way, right? But being on podcasts, right? We created our 4P strategy: podcast, partnerships, PR, and publishing. The point behind that, and people are like, man, you're bullish on podcasts. It's the perfect medium. We have multiple cameras set up. That means that we can do audio, we can do video, we can do long form, we can do short form. We can put things on YouTube, YouTube Shorts. You can have LinkedIn. You have these real Instagram reels, all of these different form factors, TikTok, whatever you want, right? The other part is I also understand that, and we can translate that into text form. So we can end up in blogs, articles, one of the pieces, press, PR, press releases, start talking more about what you're doing, right? People have reserved, PR and all of this stuff for times of crisis, right? Versus using it as, again, seen, heard, and cited, right? You can't just talk about, I always jokingly say to folks, you can't just say that you're the shit on your own blog and think that the whole world should now believe that because it's on your blog. Someone else has to cite you, right? And that's why they call them citations in these large language models. They're pulling this, and that was the other reason why I stopped going down this rabbit hole of AEO. I said, if I were to search and say, tell me, is Donald Thompson Jr. Expert in this thing? I wouldn't just go to your site. Well, of course you're going to tell me that you're the best at this thing. I would start cross-referencing it across all these other things. A human doing that is going to take days. The machine can do this in milliseconds, right? And so once I realized that, I was like, oh shit, we've got to show up everywhere, right? So then how do I do that at scale? Oh, well, we use a combination of technology, right? And people. So we had our 4P strategy. And then how do I start to curate partnerships? That's community-led growth. How do I get other people and like, hey, put me over here. I'm gonna put you over here. We're gonna create our squads and our pods.
A powerful thing you said on that, Greg, to extend, right, is people and technology.
Yes, in that order.
And so I want you to expand on that for a little bit because we are talking a lot about tech,
Yeah.
but we don't want people to understand that we're doing that independent. We're doing that intertwined,
Right.
right, with the power of people and unifying. And that I think what you're describing holistically is a term that we've coined on content supply chain, right? And so give them, our audience, a little bit on what content supply chain means to you in kind of a snippet that an executive could understand.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the lead flow crisis, and I described some of the things, again, going, you need 10 to 100x more content. The reason I talked about the Cloudflare data related to, how many scrapes to sites, because what I'm trying to get across is like, you have to have so much more content to show up all these places. It makes no sense. We're going to hire, when I say 10 to 100x, you're going to hire 100 more people, right? Now, I'm not saying you don't need to hire some people. I said, but that's not practical, or you'll go out of business. The economics doesn't make sense. But then the other side is the productivity crisis. So the lead flow crisis that's been driven by AI, then you have the productivity crisis that can be mitigated by AI, right? And so the idea being, and I say this, these are actual data points, which almost, as a knowledge worker, about 50% of our work week is comprised of searching for things to do our job, copying and pasting, and reformatting data. 50% of our work week. I ain't hired for that. I'm certain people didn't sign up and think that was going to be their job, right? And so when people come to me and there's like, well, there's no humanity in AI, it's like, how is it humane to have your great colleagues spend 50% of their time doing administrative,
Mundane work.
right? And so I said, let the machines handle the routine and let your humans handle the remarkable, right? You have to flip the time equation.
What do the young people say now? Bars.
Bars.
Yes.
Bars.
Say that. Say that again.
No, but I say it like,
Say the
but
routine
you got
versus the
the
remarkable.
machines, let the machines handle the routine and let the humans handle the remarkable, right? The idea is you flip the time equation. And you ain't gonna like this as a sales leader. The average salesperson spends 70% of their time doing administrative work. That means that only 30% of their time are they in front of customers and prospecting and trying to actually draw. They are in CRMs, they are in emails, 70% of their time.
I have I'm talking to 60 sales professionals in the insurance space. They're in the employee benefits broker space and property and casualty insurance. And we're talking about AI. And that is a powerful, powerful number. 70% is administrative work, 30% actually selling. What could you do with your best people if they were selling 80 to 90% of the time?
You flip that time equation, now you got super individual contributors, right? We were talking off camera before. That's the whole point. We're going to evolve into a world where people are going to superpower, some people will jokingly say it's like Jarvis's, the Iron Man suit and Jarvis that he wears, right? You're going to give people superpowers. Not only that, it's not just giving them superpowers, you increase their quality of work. Salespeople hate all of the administrative work they have to do. They're in the role because they wanted to talk to people. Now you've told them to just spend time talking to the machine, right? And so people talk about sales burnout. Yeah, I'd be burned out too if I spent 70% of my time not doing the thing I wanted to be doing.
In the most competitive business
Yes.
environment
Right.
in history.
Yep.
And so
Just one last
No,
point on
go
that
ahead. Yeah.
thread though too. The other part of what people have to do, and you've seen this influx of IRL or in real life in events, right? So if you're going to cut through the noise, so we're in this era of taste and trust. right? And because there's so much, I always tell people AI gives you a lot of speed and optionality, and because of that, it creates also a lot of noise. So it's hard to kind of break through anything, right? And so if all your lead flow came from organic traffic, this and that, right? The problem is people don't trust things that they don't know, can't touch. That's too abstract. So if you're in an era of taste and trust, what I would predict is you're going to see a lot of hyper local. That people are going to go back to planting salespeople directly in places where they want to grow those markets, right? It's which means that people are going to be more in person. People are going to be doing more events. Well, how many events can you go to if you spend 70% of your time doing
That's
administrative
true.
work? I can't get in front of the people, boss. I had to go update the CRM on the deals we just lost. You spent 10 hours updating the deals you lost?
So, Greg, we're gonna land the plane. This has been, again, we're business partners, we're friends. Like we could talk all day, but I wanna finish with two things, and I'll start with this one. We've talked a lot about the disruption of artificial intelligence. We've talked about how it's impacting the roles in different ways. What are some of the opportunities? What are some of the jobs that are going to be created? What are some of the things you're seeing at Walk West as a business leader that is moving the business in a new way? How do we go on offense with artificial intelligence? And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I get this question all the time, right? Which is like, well, is it going to change this? Or is it going to replace this or that? Like we were doing a training session a few weeks back, and there was a young person, and she was asking, she was in kind of the creative space, and then she was like, "Do you think it's going to kill creativity?" I was like, and the analogy I always give folks, I'm like, well, when the photography and when the camera came out, it didn't kill painting, and right, it created a new medium, right, for a group of folks that wanted to see the world and think about it differently. When motion pictures came along, it didn't kill off painters and photographers, right? At every advancement, there's going to be new forms of art and business and technology. And one of the beautiful things that people, if they understood, again, going back to the it's just this, I'm like, if you just understood what you could do with some of these things, right now we don't have ability to imagine right now, and that is very like our emotional identity a lot of times is tied to our job title, especially in the US. Other countries not as much, but in the US, one of the first things people ask you, "What do you do for a living?" You don't really get that in a lot of other countries, right? And that's part of it, like that future loss of that future shock or that loss aversion, right, is real and it's challenging. But if you could open your mind and expand to understand what are the new things that I could do with this, because what it's done is significantly reduce the costs, right? And I jokingly use from like a cultural reference, it's outdated, but I tell folks all the time, I say, what was one of the greatest technology? I said, Soldier Boy. And they're like, Soldier Boy. I said, that young man created a whole album in his damn bedroom and put it on YouTube, right? Using a different medium. YouTube didn't exist, right? If YouTube and Fruity Loops and Reason to make beats, right? If those things didn't exist and you still had to have everybody in those big ass, machines, and that was the only way that you could put out
It
and
limited access
it
for
limited
creators.
access. And so what now you have to keep thinking if you want to use an analog and from a business environment perspective, understand with the advancements of technology, how it's opened up for things that we didn't think about, right? That's what's wild to me is like, folks that are like content creators or these social media influencers. They're like, oh man, it's gonna take this and that, and like, that there were also people that thought you were taking from them, right? Like this is a cycle, and you have to keep evolving. Hollywood's now really mad at the first AI actor. I was like, I don't know why they put that out there, but whatever. But what I think about, so that's on a much grander scale, but from like a practical business perspective, what's happening is that this technology is democratized intelligence in your pocket, right? And that's one of the things that's very challenging for folks, right? Because it used to all be about what you know. And that was the thing that you could elevate yourself because I know more than you. Right. Now what happens when we all know the same? Right. Now it's going to be about how do you execute? How do you mold? How do you change? Right. And so what you're going to see from a business environment's perspective, someone that was only able to do one, maybe two things can now do 10 things at once because they have all of these things. And what they're going to see is Sam Altman calls it, we're in the age of the idea guy or gal. Right. It used to be that only people like me that used to know how to write code, because it used to be, because it's just a stat from a few years ago, less than 1/3 of 1% of the world's population can write code pre-AI, less than 1/3 of 1%, which meant that There were so few people that could actually build anything that it limited access, right? Because Soldier Boy was able to create his own beats and then had his own channel to push it out, right? And then people started like, no, 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 you got to go through this. You got to get licensed, and then they got to distribute. And he was like, I don't need the audience. I got my own audience.
I can go straight to my
I
audience.
can go straight to the consumer. And that's what happened when you fast forward down to podcasts, where people realize I can go straight to my own audience. I can curate my own pond. I don't have to worry about what Google is going to give me the crumbs I get from this and that. Right. And so what's going to happen, and Sora 2 just dropped from OpenAI. The world is about to get bananas because I'll just give you a quick kind of overview. They've basically Sora 2 is they were Sora was one of the first video models to come out. It was a little janky and it didn't make a lot of progress. Then VO3, Google, Kling, some of these others came out that were way better coming out of China and other places. And then Sora 2 drops a few days ago. And Sora 2 got all the bells and whistles, but then they did something that's very unique. You can now, you use HeyGen, you introduced me to HeyGen. You can now load your image and likeness and your voice and everything, put it on there, and now it's a social network. You can decide who gets to use the right. So you can basically create a contract. You can say, all right, I'm going to give access to Greg and Kia to be able to use my, they call it Cameo, to use my video synthetic me for whatever they want to publish and do with it. And they're creating this social work, so this social network in that way. And so some of these influencers are just going to give it. So right now they're saying that Sam Altman is the most memed person of all time because they just dropped this because he gave access to everyone. So you and I could go on Sora 2 right now, leverage Sam Altman, the digital, and have him sitting in here having a conversation with us
That's cool.
and monetize it. So you could say, now I give access. So now I give digital twin Donald access to then these 10 people. And now you go do, you don't have to, because also it creates a contract, right? It's almost like an NIL kind of deal situation, right? You can use this. I get royalty kickbacks, however you use it. I ain't got to show up everywhere now. I ain't got to be in all these different environments. Go off and go nuts. Now, some people are out there, now they're using that to meme Sam Altman, do all these other things, right? But the adoption is already bananas within under a week. Right. And so that's something that did not exist before. So now you're going to have, so think about this. If you were going back to personality led growth, if you were a CEO that didn't have a big platform, couldn't be in China tomorrow, New Zealand the next day, now you can theoretically, because now someone can put this campaign together and now have you saying this thing and this, like, hey, I can't, if I'm Ryan Reynolds, I can't really show up to do this Coca-Cola commercial. How about you use digital Ryan? I license that. It's going to be a little bit cheaper than having me actually show up, right? Now you're starting to see the volume and scale. The world is about to get nuts. And so you ask me why I learn all the time, because if I don't understand the problem set, I don't know how either to mitigate that or to use it to my competitive advantage and my team, right? So I think, so that's like a different example. But think about, going back to the productivity crisis, what I didn't describe was how much time credibly you can get back of that 50% to 70%. You could get upwards to 40 or 50% of that time back or more. Now, going back to why people failed also from the AI adoption in these pilots is what they didn't do was change the process. I always talk about people, process, and platforms in that order, right? Right now, we've got all our people, we got them trained and adopted AI, personal, safe, fun. Next step is the process. What's happening is people are they're saying, all right, I got a 10-step process. I'm going to bolt AI on the end to be on my 11th step. That's the wrong way to view it. I had 10 steps. How can I use this to get to 3 steps? Right? How do I shorten that? Again, let the machine handle the routine so that my humans can get to the remarkable. My colleagues can do the more strategic, high value work. And so what you're going to see is the people that were only hired to do this administrative work, but had great ideas. I call it executive vision charades, where there used to be, is like, hey, you're trying to tell somebody what you want or what you're trying to get. And it's like, oh, it sounds like this, it's 2 words. And then 6 months later, he's like, nah, that's not what I was thinking. Now you can vibe code, vibe market, vibe research, whatever the phrasing you want. Now the person that has a great idea, but could never actually build a prototype, could never actually show you now they can show you. Now it's like No, I'm not gonna whiteboard this. I'm gonna vibe this out in Lovable, or I'm gonna use Figma, right? And then we talk about also these tools should be able to expand your, horizon. A lot of people call this the Renaissance era now. We're in an age of generalists, right? We've all been structured and programmed to be very vertical specific.
That's right.
Like, I only do this one thing, right? You only do that one thing because that's how we were trained. It goes back to the Rockefeller days of all this kind of factory work. And, I used to joke at a couple of different stops in my journey. It's like, I said, it feels like every pencil requires two people. One of you can write and one of you can erase. That is problematic in building a business, right? And so now we finally have technology where the person that had the idea, the person that was creative, can get 60, 70, maybe 80% of the way of building this thing out and then hand it over.
To the experts.
Right. And so when they pass the baton, it's like in track, it's not like they're just standing there waiting. Now there's people, they can take off, right? And now you're running together and you're handing this off. And so that starts to be able to allow you to create things faster, get more aligned faster, prototype and produce a lot faster, right? Because what ended up happening is having all of that factory kind of mentality, you're creating latency between every stop, which means you're creating friction, time loss. So there's no accelerated time to value, no accelerated time to market. Now, a lot of folks say because it's so easy to build things, right? The true moat of a business, the defensible moat, is around speed and execution, right? Now, one other side of I would say that I'm hyper focused on as far as kind of the new world is there's this paradigm in the last 2 years I've been focusing on, which is, there's traditional SaaS software as a service, but now there's service as a software. The idea, because these tools make it more economically viable to help all types of organizations of all sizes try to do things that you've never been able to do. If you're a small company trying to put together a commercial, you couldn't do that, right? Like only a few companies got enough budget to do a Super Bowl ad, right? Only a few companies, even local, have enough budget to do a local commercial. Imagine a world in which now the HVAC guy, right, the 5-person company can do a commercial, a high quality commercial. And oh, by the way, they can license Sam Altman to talk about them in their commercial. And if they want to put it out on the local news, they can. If they want to use, CTV or connected TV and
So I
streaming,
can interview Sam Altman with
100%.
his technology and have him on my podcast.
The game is about to fucking change.
I want Kia, you got that? I want to interview
People
Sam
don't,
Altman.
that's why I'm saying people don't understand. This didn't exist 2 weeks ago. Right? So when people are like, "Why you keep getting certification?" I'm like, "I don't think you understand how fast this is moving and changing and what people can do." And so what I'm trying to also figure out is what is possible, right? Because I have the type of mind where I'm very open to anything being possible as it relates to technology. When people say the number of time people have said something will never do this, I'm like, "Oh boy, it's
Yeah,
definitely now."
Yeah, never is a trigger word. The thing I want to wind down on is that point you made towards the end is speed and execution. Because when technology starts to normalize knowledge expertise, right? And that's what you're like, right? Then it really becomes how aligned is your team to be able to work together quickly and then to be able to execute. Years ago, we used to have this triangle, right? You can have something fast, cheap,
Yeah,
or high
good.
quality,
Yeah. Fast,
right?
cheap, or good. I remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can only pick 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
In the age of AI, I want it all.
I want it
I
all.
want it low cost, I want it fast, I want it high quality. And that's what people are really working to adapt to, is that paradigm shift is already here.
And I would say that they want it faster, cheaper, and better
At every turn.
at every turn. Like that's the reality of the world that we're in. I get this across. Try to get this across people all the time. I said people was like, "Oh, well, I don't feel like that's on brand." I said, "Let me say it this way, and y'all ain't gonna like it. To be on brand means to be on time in the age of AI." Someone told me it's like, "Oh, we're thinking about doing something in May of 26." I said, "I don't think you're gonna be around in May of 26 if that's your
That's your
thought.
timeline.
If your timeline is we're gonna do this of May of 26." Yeah, I don't know how that's gonna work out, player. But I had that conversation a few days ago. I was like, hmm. And I try to give them the information at least. And now my thing is, look, I know I don't have the platform to quote unquote be the expert. So now a lot of times I post them like, hey man, don't take my word for it. Take this expert. Like Greg is an alarmist. I mean, well, these people that are in the room, right? They trying to tell you. So now I just kind of point them to like, if you don't believe me, right? Because what I don't want to do, and this goes back to my values though, and I'll shut up here in a second, which is at the end of this year, going into 2026, I do have a fundamental belief that there's going to be a lot of job loss. And what I don't want to be is that person that was like, hey man, why didn't you tell me? I said, man, I had a podcast. I was on LinkedIn. I was at every dinner. All of my wife's family members, they were like, man, we love the TED Talks that Greg gives us when we're around him. Because they'll ask me these questions, right? And it's not that I'm trying to do that, but what I'm trying to just push on them is like, man, the world is changing, man. And, you and I talk about a lot of things in business, and we've been around the block for a while, and I try to tell folks what ends up happening when you don't have a true AI strategy or you don't have a true kind of growth strategy. What ends up happening in these times of crisis is there are people right now, they're working in these back rooms to figure out who's going to be on the boat, who's going to be off. Because what they're going to do is they're going to cut deep to the bone and then figure the strategy out on the other side. We're going to cut costs to at least give us some room to do R&D, right? They're not saying so. Even Accenture, if you kind of read through some of the things that I think is Julie Sweeting is the CEO, and what she said is she said that we're going to take those dollars and then reinvest in the people that can do AI. Like she didn't say we're going to net have 11,000 people gone. She's saying these are the ones that we can't see a path in which they can do what we need them to do. So we're going to go buy. Now, they're not going to hire back 11,000. What's going to end up happening is they'll probably hire back 3,000 super individual contributors and they'll pay them double. Right. And so they still made the gain. They still made the progress.
That's right.
And then those 11,000 will likely take, if they do it right, take that skills, knowledge, and expertise and start forming little consultancies, little things over here and there. And that's the thing we've seen a lot this year, these dynamic forces that are at play, which are, I've never seen so many C-level folks losing their jobs. In my career, I've never seen so many VPs, directors, senior directors, C-level folks, right? And then I've also never seen so many C-level folks so excited to start their own consulting practice, right? So those two dynamic forces have created this big pool of solopreneurs. Some of those solopreneurs are going to work and they're going to create more jobs. I posted something the other day. I said, you can't have an economy without small business.
Sure.
People keep talking about most people in the U.S. are employed in small business. Like, it's just a fact. You can talk about Google and this and that, all that. If you just let small business die off, there will be no economy. Then it's a wrap. Then you got a fundamental problem. But I do believe that people that are going to ride the wave are going to start to create new things, which will create new jobs, new ways for folks to go to market. And you will also, I would say, it's so polarized as it relates to, I was on stage at the American Marketing Association in May. I said, on one side of the equation, if you lean into AI, you will likely make more money. On the other side, if you don't lean into AI, you likely won't have a job. There is no in between. I say, I don't even understand the choice. Like, start thinking about it this way. Do you want to be employable?
It's a, there used to be a thing with an arms race, right? A nuclear arms race with Russia. If you follow college sports and athletics, it was an arms race for facilities.
Yep.
Right. Now it's an arms race for who can pay their players the most in college and different things.
Right.
And in business today, it is an arms race with who can execute with AI strategies with speed and execution. And so I've enjoyed chatting with you, my friend. This has been great. I know we got a lot of good information and content, and I'm gonna land the plane, but you did great, and I'm excited about what the future holds for you and AI Serious. Last thing is tell people about your podcast, where to connect with you, how to reach you.
Yeah, so the podcast, AI Voice of Victim, you can see us on any kind of podcast platform. Also, there's a YouTube if you want to see us talk about it and laugh and joke in real time. If you want to connect with me, you can go on LinkedIn. It's just Greg Boone. If you go on X, it's actually AI Serious. Somehow that was available, so I grabbed it. But those are the fundamental ways. I'll say LinkedIn is where I'm most found, but then enjoy the podcast and AI Voice of Victim. Should be fun.
Thank you for joining us on High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. Today's episode is a step in our collective journey towards leadership excellence. Remember, every story we share and every insight we gain is a piece in the puzzle of our leadership journey. For more insight and detail, hit the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. For deeper information and more episodes, go to donaldthompson.com. Continue to lead with vision and purpose, and until we meet again, embrace your role as a high-octane leader in the ever-evolving world of business.